Hey guys, it's Arenthio here, and we have a special guest. We have a Lehu here, and I guess we'll talk about. It's up to us, but I guess we could start with Twitter and I guess gentrification of the furry community.
So, the furry community at large is, well, actually, it's like many hobbies of a certain type. And by this type, I mean one where materialism is a large driving force. And specifically applying to furry, what we have is something where, you have your haves, your have-nots, and very few in between.
Yeah.
So, I suppose I could start with Twitter here because it's one that's fresh in my mind. So I've started a long break on Twitter, and I really don't know when I'll come back, but I know it's going to be at least, we're looking at 2 or 3 months minimum, and I'm serious about it. This is not like previous ones where I might have been gone for a week just for a little break, but this one is I've kind of just written off that app, that particular ecosystem, so to speak. And the thing with Twitter is the way it's designed it makes it uniquely one of if not the worst social media apps. It's where all the problems that you see about this gentrification that happens in the furry community and in a lot of communities, Twitter is where these problems manifest the most.
Yeah, like a good example of this is, I guess it's something that I've sort of experimented a bit with. But if you're trying to build an account up,
Right.
it's kind of, I tried the art route, right? I tried giving out free art, and I mean, sure, people took the free art, but beyond that, nothing really happened, right? People said, "Oh, sure, yeah, I'll take the art," but they kind of just disappeared after that, right? So it was kind of But when I wore my stupid fursuit, all of a sudden everyone simped for it, right? It's like there's no point in putting all this effort in if I could just wear a suit. And I mean, the issue with, I mean, it seems to be something trivial, right? Oh, you get more followers or whatever. But I guess I'll be making a video of this pretty soon about the whole Garo situation, since it sort of encapsulates my whole theory on how power works in the furry community, right?
Right.
Initially, I remember looking at Garo's account and looking at his opposition. It was quite small, right? There was this small YouTuber at the time who had like 400 subscribers, who was pretty much the only one talking about the whole Garo situation on YouTube. And the reason I didn't really join in on that conversation is since the power dynamic there really wasn't favorable to me,
Right.
right?
So,
I had like 200 subscribers. If I link up with someone who has 400,
they would you'd get squashed like a bug if that happened.
exactly. And that's why I think Garo afforded to just ignore us in a sense, right? We're not important enough for him to actually address us directly. That's, I guess, the lowest level of top-down interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And when the whole Garo situation came up, right, more influencers that are much bigger than Garo actually jumped on the bandwagon, right? So in that situation, the power dynamic shifted drastically.
Suddenly shifted because all of a sudden you have these people with thousands or tens of thousands of followers, and chances are they, especially considering how this fandom is structured, the chances are they somewhere along the line could afford something to get them to where they are, whether it was a fursuit or a large collection of commissioned art.
Yeah. Mind you, I'm not looking at this through a super individualistic perspective, right? This really doesn't have anything to do with what you can do as an individual, right? This is something that's more of a systemic kind of thing. So
right. And here's the thing, this fandom, okay, so there are, what I like to think, there are many Garos in this fandom, but they don't express themselves the way Garo did. Because what Garo did was, you see, oh my goodness, these insane membership tier prices and these ridiculous guidelines in his Discord server. You see these things and you're like, okay, this is ridiculous. This is like cartoonishly just the most narcissistic thing you could possibly see. Well, here's the thing, and this is the tiniest shred, and I'm not defending him. I mean, he's really, he's genuinely a horrible person. The tiniest shred of credit I'll give is that he openly expressed how narcissistic he was most of these populars, they don't do that. They aren't honest. And again, that's the tiniest shred I'll give him. Other than that, he's just as, I write him off just as much as any of these other populars, and they don't express it. They hide it. They're silent about it, and they will hide it behind a facade of, oh, numbers don't matter. Oh, how much money or whether you have a first or not.
I mean, the issue I
They'll
have
ignore
with
you
that,
anyways.
I mean, the issue that I have with that rhetoric is if you sort of speak within that frame of logic, you're going to end up with sort of a social Darwinistic way of thinking in a sense, right?
Right. And
If you're in a situation where if you have money, you're going to have a way higher chance of succeeding in this power game, right? If the rhetoric is that if you are powerful, it's because you are very meritorious, and if you aren't powerful, if you're a weak person in the community, then you're just lazy or something, right?
Right.
I mean, that kind of discards the whole income, not in wealth inequality thing, in the sense that
right. I mean, I think a particularly cogent example of this is the type of artwork you see. You can see these amazing pieces with just unbelievable amounts of detail, and your really deep personal interpretation of certain anthropomorphic characters and what's going on, and then they'll get so and so amount of likes. And then you'll see a cartoonish or maybe suggestive piece of artwork that will get literally orders of magnitude more attention than that. That's one example.
I mean, the issue that I have with this is that followers in themselves, just as a number, may not seem important, but the issue comes into play when that can directly translate into some form of power in the community, right?
Right.
Again, you talked about the Garo situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just an example of how power can be used in the community, whether it's for narcissistic reasons or whatever you'd want it to be, right? It's just an example of how power can be used in the community. And I'm just frustrated by the fact that people don't seem to want to acknowledge that. I mean, a lot of people seem to maybe unconsciously acknowledge it. For example, if one of my detractors want to shit on Beta or something, they'll tap dance around them and be super quote unquote polite in that situation, right? As to not incur Beta's wrath. But if it's someone who really doesn't have any influence, it's sort of an all-out thing, right? They can send people after them. There's no civility in that situation.
That's another reason why I'm taking a Twitter break. I mean, my last if you ever look at my account, my last few posts are basically a bunch of venting, and some of the venting is quite irrational because again, the things that happen in this fandom and the things that we hear about and we see about English, the things we hear and see all the time, especially on Twitter in particular, sometimes on YouTube. It can instill feelings that are irrational, and I have to watch what I say sometimes, and I'll vent in my head things that that if they were spoken, it would be called too rude or something. So I was holding back a little bit, even with those last few tweets that I did, and now I'm just leaving the account sort of. It's live, but I'm not using it. And if I do pick it back up again, it's going to be exclusively for sharing art or something. But even then, that's a bit of a stretch. I don't know if I want to use it again. I mean, I've had better experiences on other platforms. I'm not saying that other platforms in this community don't have problems, because they do, and they can be big, but none compare to Twitter. Twitter just takes the cake for the most awful, toxic social media platform in general, because of the way it's designed. It's fleeting. It's very fast paced. I'm not referring a while back.
Oh, you cut out for a second. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. So I'm not going to not acknowledge that other platforms, social media platforms, the YouTubes and Discords and Telegrams of this world don't have their problems, because they do, and some of them can be very, very big problems. But none of them, in my experience, have compared to Twitter in terms of just how awful Twitter is, in terms of how much toxicity can pile up from the way it's designed. It's fast-paced. Things go by very quickly. And
also that kind of thing rewards. I mean, I think that's why I guess fursuit media is I guess put in higher regard than anything that would take a little longer to make, right? Since it's very easy to just take a picture of you in a suit and you
And
can like
then
post those pictures over and over on Twitter.
there's do
And
Fursuit
yeah,
Friday. Like I look at Fursuit Friday pics, and it's ridiculous. It's the same thing over and over and over again. The same type of pictures. I
I
mean,
used to do it as well.
some people will do it in different, more creative ways, but most of the time, the stuff that gets all the algorithm stuff that gets recommended on the timeline is just the same types of poses and lighting that you see, often suggestive, over and over and over again. And quite frankly, it's ridiculous. That whole app, Twitter, is ridiculous. So
I mean, I'd say it's worse since fursuits cost a lot of money, right? I mean,
yes,
it's
they
not.
do.
I mean, you're kind of a good example of. I think a lot of people like to argue that, oh, people should just save money and take 10 jobs just to get a fursuit. But I
Well,
mean,
guess what? As you
yeah,
save money, the prices for I'll say the recognizable suits, they will continue going up. And I get it from the makers. So here's the thing, it's a double-edged sword. I get it
yeah,
from the maker's perspective that yes, there's inflation. Yes, if they want to continue the same, living margins that they have, then, they kind of have to. But at the same time, it comes off as becoming the higher up status in the fandom becomes more and more exclusive to those who can afford it, and that pool of those who can afford it, who basically bankroll the artists and makers,
yeah.
becomes smaller and smaller and smaller until eventually it's like how
Like a yacht club.
composers or an artist had to live in about
Yeah.
16th 17th century Europe, where pretty much the only ones funding them was the aristocracy, which was a tiny amount of people funding them. It's the same thing that's happening in the world, but definitely the states. Definitely the states in terms of balance. And once again, this is just another example of how the furry fandom is a microcosm of general society. And you see all these parallels taking place.
I mean, you talked about yourself having some financial issues. I mean, I guess you're like an example of someone in the boat of not being able to afford a fursuit.
Of course.
It's not as simple as, oh, just save money, right? There are
No.
opportunity costs, there are actual living costs, and so on and so forth, right? If you,
No, I got to live first.
yeah, like I mean, I think you gave the example of whether you'd pay a car down payment versus getting a fursuit or something, right?
Mhm.
I mean, sure, it's a choice, but there is a massive opportunity cost involved as far as like this whole situation where you either have power or you don't have power, right?
Right. And that power often comes with the benefit of, everyone's running up to you, just like trying to like connect with you. And
I mean,
in
it can
some ways,
also,
and it can
yeah,
be, and, for a lot of these people who get their fursuit, the increased attention is very much, it can act like a curse of sorts.
I guess the main issue I have is that it can either be used offensively or defensively, right? If you're a very, very influential and quote unquote powerful person in the fandom, I guess you're immune from any kind of, if anyone has issue with you, or let's say you get into a drama with some random people who have, I guess, less power than you. I mean, at least in the eyes of the public, you're probably going to be seen as being right, right?
Mhm.
Regardless of whether you're in the situation where whether you're correct or not, you're probably going to be seen as right as far as the public is concerned.
Mhm.
Regardless, since you probably have a direct line of communication to them in a parasocial way. But if it goes the other way around, and let's say someone who is very influential doesn't like you, they can use that offensively, right? Like they can, for instance, just
Well, of
say
course,
you're this and this, and people will just believe it.
like I said, they can squash you like a bug. And with the amount of I have 303, no 304. That's my current follower count on Twitter. Most of these well, for lack of a better word,
Influencers. Yeah.
influencers. If I would, I was venting and ranting. I vented to some of my friends in DMs like, "Oh, I'm taking a break from Twitter." Some of these people, I probably didn't do anything to like trigger you know, the hive mind, so to speak, to
Yeah.
sort of start running after me. But some people find me overly negative and cynical, and to them I say I'm just world weary. I've seen so many of my hobbies, especially in the last couple of years, the pandemic and inflation and whatnot. My theme park hobby kind of crumbling because the parks themselves, I'm a little bit of a side tangent here.
Yeah.
So for most of the 2010s, I frequently visited theme parks and rode different attractions and roller coasters and
Oh,
whatnot.
and like just to preface, like I mean, people may argue that oh, you're just lazy and you're not like working for your suit or something, but I mean, you're literally like a grad student,
I'm literally a
and
grad student, and
so you can't make that argument.
I
You're
haven't,
working your ass off.
yeah, and I haven't really started my career. I mean, I haven't even settled. I've moved, I think, let me count. So that was 2018 was like not really because they didn't really take my stuff. Early 2019, and then in middle of 2020 was the second move of my grad school time because at the time my housemates they were about to start a family, so I had to leave. So that was a second move, and that was summer 2020. And after I finish this master's thesis, I'm gonna have to move a third time. And I don't know where and when I'm going to settle down and actually have work. So it all depends on what happens in the future, and my future is uncertain.
I mean, like this goes back to the whole assumption that social Darwinistic way of thinking, right? Like
Right.
if you don't have a suit, you must be lazy and you must not work multiple jobs, or you must not save enough money or something. You must not manage your money correctly, which you clearly aren't, right? Like you're managing your money rationally. I mean, in fact, if you do have a suit, it's probably the opposite, right? If you're in the same financial position.
Well, I mean, some people who do get. I mean, there are some people who very irresponsibly, and I see this happening. They will get a suit, and then the GoFundMe start, and because they're irresponsible. But some do get their suit because they're absolutely swimming in money, and I don't want to go. I suppose if we.
Oh, the tech bro thing.
I mean, that's just. I mean, that's kind of it is a stereotype. I mean, they're one type of group that you can see based on earnings data.
I mean, the whole money thing also coincides with, I guess, the culture that may be promoted in the furry fandom, right? Again, I'm coming from a political science perspective. If you have a certain demographic that's in power, like whatever demographic that may be, I guess their interest would be put first in whatever community you're in.
Well, they have the money, and right now as we speak, chances are if you are going into or are in is probably the more proper way. If you're in a tech/engineering related field, and you don't obviously you're good at it, you have to be good at it too.
Right.
Chances are you'll be sitting pretty. You'll be able to have your own place and live well under your means, which will give you a lot of disposable income to start off with. And I get it. In some places, that's a lot harder to do because the rents and mortgages and outright housing buys are just that expensive. And for some people, they do still struggle despite having an increased income over a lot of different professions. But this happens, and they're able to afford a higher, so to speak, a higher lifestyle than those who are not. And again, tech engineering, that's kind of somewhat of it is a stereotype. Let's be fair, of the tech engineering with all the goodies, the fursuit, the art, and all the other things, and the frequent con travel. I mean, there are different professions out there that'll get you similar amounts of money, but I'm just saying that type of demographic exists, and I notice it. It's obviously there are exceptions, like any demographic, but it's just something I observe.
I mean, I think I remember you talking about, remember we talked about, I guess to start things off, I mean, you hear this argument a lot, something along the lines of you don't need a fursuit or you don't need art or so on and so forth to be a furry, right? I mean, technically that's true, right?
Technically, yes.
If you're playing a game where 99% of it's gated off is by a subscription, I mean, sure, you can log into the game, sure, you can play around in the lobby, but does that mean you technically have access? Well, like, functionally, do you have access to the game? Not really. I mean, you technically can join the game, but again, the content that you have access to is very limited, right? Again, we talked about that whole Twitter situation. You're handicapped as far as power is concerned, right?
And again, the way Twitter is designed with its very fast pace and shorter messages and overall appealing to the shortest of short attention spans. The addictive eye candy that is a fursuit or art of an anthropomorphic character that's drawn in a conventionally attractive or suggestive manner
Yeah.
and depicting, that character basically in early adulthood and in that sort of prime, so to speak. That fits into Twitter's design like a glove, and again, that will that'll get more people interested and more people wanting to introduce themselves in some way, whether it's parasocial or not.
Yeah.
And for the most part, my experience on Twitter is like, I just use it. I just used it. I didn't really have any plans to like grow a following. I just wanted to share random experiences and whatnot. But now that I realize what this app is tailored for, I decided, I'm just gonna write it off at the very least temporarily. And if I ever come back, I'm not gonna be all that active.
I mean, also from what I've seen, the same types of people who argue that you don't need a fursuit or art to be a furry seem to be the same people that say, "Oh, look at this city; it has a lot of furries in it," right? I think you mentioned this
Seattle.
earlier. Yeah, but I mean, in that situation, it's only people that can. I'm guessing they have jobs that pay more, right? So they can ostentatiously show that they're a furry.
There's the that's another part of the sort of tech engineering demographic is oftentimes that type of profession can afford you life in a major coastal city, and is almost always the case. The big cons almost always happen in major coastal, just major cities in general.
I mean, I didn't think about it that way as well. I mean, the major cons seem to be located in areas where furries that have money are located, right? Again, it's another example of if you have power, then your interest will be mirrored in reality, right?
Mm-hmm. Just like in general society, a coastal city where housing prices are really high. Yeah, it's great if you can comfortably afford to live there.
Yeah, I mean that's why we talked about this whole gentrification issue, right? Like, gentrification in the sense that it's really weird to me. The furry community is supposed to be very welcoming and inclusive.
There's the big irony right there. The furry
but
it's
only
inclusive
if you can afford it, right?
Sure, it's inclusive. In that everyone will come up to you if you can afford it. Sure, maybe it's more inclusive. If we're talking about just being a place for LGBTQ plus, whatever the term continues to change, but we'll use that overall umbrella.
Yeah,
as a place for that community. That's fine. That's fine. I like that. But in terms of just other things, like how much money you have, or maybe how good of an artist you are in some other cases, those things are big barriers and they divide.
I mean, even from what I've seen on furry media in general, I mean, sure, we talk about the LGBTQ stuff, but as far as class is concerned, that's never talked about, right? I mean,
no,
it's even
it's
something that's actually, from what I've seen, it seems to be like something that's actually actively discouraged, right? Again, we have the whole rhetoric of this sort of social Darwinistic rhetoric,
right? And when we're talking about these issues, it's written off as jealousy, and for some people, it can instill feelings of jealousy for those who don't have everything, which is a really destructive process for mental health wise. That exists, and so whenever the furry fandom says it's accepting, sure, if you think of it just from an LGBTQ perspective, yes,
who have money.
But if you don't have a lot of money, if you can't go to cons frequently, that's just another part. It doesn't apply to all of these, but it's like one or more.
I mean, that's why I felt that I needed to. It's one of the reasons I needed to get a fursuit, right, and buy expensive art, since otherwise, I don't think I would be taken very seriously as someone who makes videos, right? I mean, people could make the argument that, oh, I'm just jealous because I can't afford these things. But the reason why I'm doing it is because
the people who have that, they will use the jealousy word. But the thing is, they may or may not, they may or may not have struggled to get where they are in the fandom. But once they're there, and they're on top of the world, they begin to lose their ability to understand that not everyone in this fandom has the same amount of money or the same amount of art or material possessions as they do that can get them attention. And of course, personally speaking, I don't want to go after that crazy amount of attention because I'm actually terrified of what it could do to my own psyche.
I've sort of compared not having consumer goods versus having consumer goods at a con, for instance. I mean, sure, you can make friends and make social connections at a con without a
Oh,
suit. I've tried both.
Oh,
I've compared.
that's the thing. I don't think I'd ever wish to go to a con unless A, I have at the very least a partial suit, or
Yeah.
B, I have a friend group and I go with them and I really, really trust them. Those are the only two scenarios in which I would go to a con. And the way things are right now, I would select the latter option. I'd have a specific friend group and we all plan it out together. That's if I don't have a fursuit, that's how I'm doing it. Otherwise, I'm not going to any one of these cons. At least not having a suit.
I mean, the thing about that, the whole suit thing at a con as far as making social connections is concerned, is that I remember when I first attended a con, like I didn't have a suit, right? And I tried to do everything to make friends. I tried to I tried to ask for people's telegrams and I tried to be really nice. But what I've noticed was you kind of have, I think someone called them ... Telegram friends. You add them as friends on Telegram. That's kind of where it ends, right? Since they don't remember, you're not a very memorable person after the con. But if you have a suit, I've noticed that I went to the con with a suit.
And a piece of addictive eye candy.
I mean, it sort of recognized me afterwards and wanted to continue talking to me. I usually initiate the conversation, and it didn't really work out very well for me. And I guess the first time I went to a con, but the second time that I went to a con with the suit, I had
makes all the difference.
Yeah, I had a lot more reciprocation, and I remember my friends telling me that he kind of felt excluded not having a suit, right? Since there were these other events at the furry fandom, it's not a fandom, at the con, where you would kind of feel out of place without a suit. On top of that, there really weren't any suitors in certain exclusive areas at a convention.
I suppose this could bring me to, I think this is something that's wholly new, but I don't want to name names because this person has like over 2,000 followers now.
Yeah.
And I knew him when he had like 50 on Twitter. So I got to see
I don't even use Twitter anymore. It's a shithole, to be honest.
Yeah, and as viewers know from watching earlier on, I pretty much wrote it off.
And if you guys watched my video on Euros, my roommate's a little loud, but when I made my video on Eurocentrism, that was supposed to be a sort of parallel to the furry community, right? I mean, I'd say it's worse in the furry community since, again, you have to buy these additional consumer goods to make your content presentable in the mainstream. I mean, having the hardware and software and just having the disposable time to make videos or make TikToks or
there's that
things,
too on the hardware side,
things of that sort.
And don't even get me started on the full body tracking VR that some of these people have, and the latest RTX whatever graphics card, whatever the latest number. I mean, they're still on the 3,000 production right now, but of course it's impossible to get one at MSRP or lower, because in case of used ones, then yes, hopefully be lower than that. But we've seen a huge issue with supply and market shifting, specifically to the crypto. So another part of the whole materialism is the VR, specifically full body tracking. I mean, you'll see people who are just using VR chat on desktop mode getting ignored because they don't have full body tracking.
They look like stick figures.
Yeah, and they're shunned because of it. That's a shame that they're shunned because of that. But there's getting the equipment to make good content. Some of them they will use really, really strong graphics cards, and unless anyone's living under a rock right now, getting even just like a mid-high graphics card, like you don't need to get top of the line, but even something like along the lines of a 3060 or 3070 is just absolutely impossible to find. And really, it's most graphics cards right now, impossible to find for a reasonable price right now due to a variety of issues.
Remember you said it in a funny voice, like crypto mining.
Yeah, crypto mining and the general chip shortage have kind of created a perfect storm of graphics cards that are really hard to come by for a reasonable price. Well, they're really hard to come by if you want to get it for a reasonable price, in which case it's nearly impossible. Most of the prices you'll see are outrageous. These people either through sheer luck at, say, a micro center or something, or some kind of, or maybe they're on the EVGA wait list. Either way, some of them even give in to paying scalpers, which I do not support at all. They'll have these things, and it's a demonstration of the money they have wherever they got it from.
It makes them more competitive than others in that.
It makes them more competitive when
game.
it comes to content creation, and being able to, if they're streamers, they'll be able to stream their games in a much higher quality. So again, there's that, and that can be applied to general streaming, but in the furry side of things, it certainly applies to. But anyways, I would like to move on to sort of the last. This is really probably the newest thing that I'll be sharing on this podcast, which is very fascinating. So I'm not going to name this person again because they have 2,000 plus on Twitter, and I have like just over 300, and they would squash me.
You don't want to be squished like a bug.
Nope. So I'm not naming names, but I can tell you some, but not all details. So it's a really fascinating look into how the transformation from nobody to somebody in this fandom can totally warp someone's mind and just transform them from even the most genuine soul you'll ever meet into the most soulless.
Yeah.
So it's just really, really sad how this process can just completely transform people for the worse. So when I first, ran into this person, this is when I was still using Twitter. This was early 2020 during the early phases of COVID lockdown, and I was just sort of wandering around on Twitter. And this was shortly after I created my persona too. So I was just wandering around, seeing on Twitter and also on Discord server that one of my friends has. And I ran into this person, and he was also a theme park and roller coaster enthusiast like I was, because I've dumped that hobby completely as of this past year. Like a lot of other hobbies, the cost to do it has gone way up. And I get it, there's inflation, but it's restricted to people with higher earnings, like so many of these other things. Anyways, we were both theme park and roller coaster enthusiasts. We both play Planet Coaster and some other games, and we were furries. So we would have Discord calls, and over time we message each other on Telegram, and the message back and forth dialogue, it wasn't one-sided, got more and more frequent. This was throughout 2020, and during that time period it got up to like maybe a couple on 150, 200. And my memory is not the clearest of that, but it was like 150, 200. Our follower counts were, in the grand scheme, were comparable. And of course, I couldn't care less about my follower account because unlike some of these people. But we would Discord calls sometimes for hours, just talking about theme parks, roller coasters, just random stuff, and we stream games and shows and movies and whatnot. It was a good time. It really was. That's the thing. I made memories from this. So then 2021 comes around. He did a few shit posts like in December 2020, and that got his follower count up like overnight from about 150 something to well over 300 overnight.
Right.
And it was like just a shit post, the type of shit post you see from a lot of, hobby furries. And I should have seen throughout 2020 and early 2021 what this person was doing. He was simping on all the Popufur posts, and I should have known better. Again, I was sort of still new to the fandom in 2020. That's kind of when I joined in earnest. By the way, this is another topic for later. I was 25 and turning 26 when it happened, which by the sort of invisible barriers that the fandom puts up that aren't spoken of because people don't dare to speak of it, or
we could talk about that as well, like the age thing. Yeah,
we can get to that after this. But throughout 2020 and 2021, he would do very simp-ish replies to the Popufur posts, really, really, tens of thousands of followers type posts that, I look at them and I'm like, why should I give you attention? I knew better in terms of that. But I didn't know better in terms of what this person was doing because, again, we had already, created good memories, and I was legit convinced. And, he told me, well, he didn't tell me, but he put me on a list of close friends. And now I look at that and I realize how fake it was.
Yeah.
And again, at the time, he had only a couple hundred followers. Then he did the shit post in December 2020, and it shot up by a couple hundred or so, well past what I had at the point. Then in the first half of 2021, that's when the transformation really started, because that's the time when the pictures of his fursuit progress as it was being put together started coming out, and he started gaining more and more and more and more followers. And as that happened, the two-sided dialogue we had going in the Telegram Discord became more and more one-sided.
With you initiating the conversations, right?
Yes. So it used to be that we'd be equal in terms of initiating the conversation, and then it was just me, and he would reply less and less, and he wouldn't reply less and less, and his replies got shorter and shorter. They weren't like negative, but
There was an imbalance of investment. Like you would invest more time, like a lot
well, I
more
was
time into
investing the same amount,
yeah,
but he wasn't, and he was
yeah,
talking more and more with those of the higher up status,
yeah,
and eventually, right around the time when he got his fursuit, like June, July ish.
yeah,
So the first half of 2021, that's when the transformation really started to happen. This was when the progress pictures of his fursuits were being tweeted out by,
yeah,
well, he was sharing it. I don't think the maker was actually had a Twitter, but he was sharing them, and he got more and more and more followers. And as he did, he talked more and more with people with similar or higher amounts of followers, and just
yeah,
influence in general. Followers is just one metric. And that's when the two-sided nature of our conversations in Discord and Telegram. Well, first of all, he became less and less active on his Discord and eventually took his server down. It doesn't
yeah,
exist anymore. So there's that. And our conversations on Telegram, which were once two-sided, became one-sided. And I wasn't putting in any more effort than I did earlier. It's just he
right.
started replying less and less. And by June or July, right when he got his suit, this was middle of 2021, I just totally fell off the radar, and he was living it up, so to speak, quote unquote, living it up, end quote,
Right.
with the high
The
life.
influencers.
And ever since then, I've just totally written him off. All he does now is the soulless, I'm not cute, ooh, ooh, okay, I'm cute. Stuff like that. Just
The assembly line memes that keep
the
happening
assembly
over and over
line,
again.
yeah, the assembly line, attention-seeking tweets. He didn't
Yeah.
used to be that way. That's the thing, and now he is. Now that he has all this clout, he forwarded himself into the lifestyle or at least the particular lifestyle, and he just hasn't been the same. And I haven't been the same because I was too naive to realize what he was doing when those simping posts back when he had a low follower count. But I haven't been the same since either, in the sense that, I can now see and tell, like, should I really be giving my attention to this person if they are quote unquote ambitious? Because I should back away. That summer was my disillusionment, or like big step of my disillusionment about furry fandom being the most accepting place. And, again, when I first kind of started interacting with other furs in earnest, came off initially as what it advertises itself as. But of course,
I mean, if you actually dig deeper, then you can see the actual
WARY, wary of
wary,
these types of people, especially early on in the early phases. And I made a mistake one point telling someone, "Oh, don't let this get to you," and they wrote it off as too negative. Like, why would I ever do that? The thing is, it happens to people on a subconscious level, whether they realize it or not. That was the end of that connection right there. So I'm like, okay, I'm done with Twitter. I am so done with it.
Especially the bullshit where, I've seen this a lot, but like when people do gain a lot of influence, they say, oh, it's not about the follower count, even though like literally everything they do corroborates the fact that they're doing it for followers or whatever.
Yeah, whether they realize it or not. Then there's the
age
next
thing,
Oh, that's the next topic, which I alluded to earlier. So I designed my persona, at least the first design. I'm going to redesign him at some point this year in earnest, and started wandering around the fandom social media spaces at first in early 2020. This was right before the world as we knew it changed forever. But so I was 25 and just about to turn 26, and little did I realize that part of the barriers of this fandom, and again, it's something that is either not talked about, or when it is talked about, it comes off as, oh, you don't have to be 18 to 24, or even more restrictive, like 18 or 19.
Yeah, it's the same argument.
If you're over 25, or if you're over your late 20s, or if you're over 30, 30 is a big one. Oh, if you're over 30, it's not too old to be a fur, or furries over 30 are valid. And most of the people who are getting attention in this fandom are most of them over 30, and chances are, if they are over 30, they've been around the fandom for a long time. So, no pun intended, they got grandfathered in when they were younger and they have the following already. So if they're over 30 and you see them as a large influencer, that's because they've spent the time. Whereas if you're like new to the fandom and if you're new and you're getting into your late 20s or you're in your 30s, it's a lot more difficult to make friends because the general demographic of the fandom, especially nowadays, it didn't used to be that way, but towards the end of the 2010s, it's shifted a lot towards the sort of 18, around college age mostly. So 18 to 22, or maybe 24 for being a little bit more conservative estimate there. So why are they getting the most attention? This is just speculation on my part. So take it for how it is, which is whether you want to take it seriously or not. But anyways, 18 to 24 or 18 to 22 even, that particular age range is basically the sort of in the conventional or Western or whatever you want to call it beauty standard. 18, like early adulthood, basically. Those first 5 or so years after 18 is considered the prime. You'll never look any better. You're already blessed in terms of your overall form. 18 to 24, that's the time. That's the prime. And that's the age of most of the recent, big influencers. And people who are able to afford all these things like fursuit, lots of art commissions, and frequently travel to cons in that 18 to early 20s range.
Yes.
They get to flaunt it because they get to also in IRL pics, they get to flaunt their own maximum by Western / conventional, whatever you want to call it, beauty, and that people know that the person inside that fursuit is conventionally really attractive. When they're like 18 to 23, that's another problem, and I really think it has to do with that just being the prime, so to speak, the prime of young adulthood. You're an adult, but you're still youthful, and there's this obsession with youth in the youthfulness and the strapping virile young person. So that's just my speculation about that.
I feel like the influencers right now are being grandfathered in since they already have a large audience to begin with.
Once they get up there to like late 20s, early 30s, they'll still have an audience because they were able to do it when they were much younger. And if you're getting started ahead of, even as early as
that's why
27.
That's why I talk about this whole situation with the opportunity cost, right? Sure, you can save up to buy a fursuit, 4 years from now, but by then, will it be too late?
That'll be, let's see.
Because
27, just about to turn 28, so that's 32. The subconscious message will be, you got your fursuit too late. You missed the party, That's the subconscious message.
Even for someone, I guess, around my age, even if they would save up for a suit 4 years from now, it might be too late, right? They're going to be around 24, 25. And
right
at that
tail
point,
end.
At that point, will they have enough time to build up their platforms to the degree where they would be able to be grandfathered in? At that point, it's going to be very hard. That's why I'm saying this money thing matters even more. It's not just a matter of saving.
Yeah, it's not just a matter of saving. Yeah. It's if you don't somehow have a status of swimming in money, whether it's a trust fund or somehow you're able to land a position that makes you loads. We're talking, if the rent or mortgage isn't too high, you're talking at least starting at 70 or 80K a year. Again, with those tech engineering positions, those are the most prominent example, but there are more than that. But just saying.
That also has to do with education, right? At least from most of the furries I've seen, once they're out of high school, a lot of them can't really afford to go to a 4-year institution immediately.
And sometimes it depends on where they work, or if they, somehow have what's called a lucky break in life, and they're able to start making loads and loads of money and they're 19, 20, 21. There's some people who are either tremendously talented or get lucky, and again, it's a tiny amount of people. A lot of them, though, and this is more than you want to admit, are trust fund people, and they're basically just swimming in money from the get-go and without doing anything, and they'll use it. They'll use that money wherever they get it from to afford all the material things to build a platform in the fandom. And of
I mean,
course,
like
eventually they'll be able to make their own money that way.
like even with the whole like the engineering thing, for the vast majority of people that get into that kind of thing, that's like already considering that they've attended a 4-year institution, like most of them, at an engineering school or something, right? And let's be honest, you're not going to be as competitive if you don't have a full education, right? If you're trying to apply for a job at Google, for instance, because like for the majority of people, even for that field, like you're either going to have to be extremely talented if you want like a full ride scholarship or something like
If
that.
you want a full ride, yes, you have to
Yeah.
stand out.
Or your parents can help you pay for a
Yeah.
4-year institution immediately.
Yeah,
like
or
it's either those two.
Yes. So either they're tremendously talented.
Yeah. And like another thing about that is if you get a loan or something, I mean that would kind of like prevent you from actually affording these like
Yes,
luxury goods afterwards.
that's another thing is of course student debt. The nightmare.
That's why I said you can only go through those two routes. Otherwise, it's student debt, and you're
Otherwise, you
inhibited.
are saddled with debt. So when we're talking about disposable income, and this is after all the living expenses and putting stuff into savings, if you're responsible, it's only disposable income. These are people who are most likely debt free.
Again, like if you have debt, you're probably going to be spending a large portion of your money on it, and even if you're making like 60, 70K, you're still going to have to
the true amount that you actually make is less than that if you're in debt.
Yeah, and that's even considering that you do get one of these high-paying jobs. Because I mean, even if you do go into some kind of engineering field that's in high demand, like it's not really a guarantee that you're going to make a ton of money, right?
Right.
Like we are approaching about an hour, so I guess this is all we have time for. But I think we've covered everything that we wanted to cover, right? I mean,
right.
Yeah.
And I think the key here is not to express feelings of jealousy, which can be, inflicted by this behavior to some people, and it's very destructive. But especially, what I want to talk about, and I hopefully we, did here, is just highlight that, if you're going to want to, join the fandom or be a part of it, or just identify under the general furry umbrella in any capacity, that you need to understand these issues with the fandom and avoid them before you fall into one of those pits.
Well, despite how the advertising is, right? Like, I mean, from an outsider's perspective, like it may seem like super welcoming and so on and so forth. But I mean, if you actually spend a significant time in the fandom, like you'd understand these wealth inequality things that you're not really allowed to talk about, right? Like we're supposed to just pretend that everything's fine. And sure, you talk about the LGBT stuff, but beyond that, nothing really seems to be acceptable to talk about, especially wealth stuff,
Well, the common theme is anything that directly addresses the hierarchical / power structure that exists in the fandom is unwelcome, and that kind of honesty is unwelcome. But anyways, thank you so much for having me on board here to talk about these things.
No problem. Yeah, I guess thanks for watching, everyone. See you guys later.